Putin just loves to work away at the difference between those two things and to test and humiliate and expose NATO in all sorts of ways. And I think this is quite a dangerous moment, actually, in the sense that if this firing of drones towards Poland, for example, becomes routine, I think all sorts of things may happen, including Poland unilaterally responding. Trump might finally do something to back up NATO.
I'm joined by Mark Urban. As so often, he's here to talk us through the big foreign policy, diplomatic and defence stories. Hello, Mark. Welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you with us. Let's start by, let's see, which war should we pick first?
Oh, my Lord. It's a busy week ahead of us.
Isn't it just? Let's start by talking about what's going on with Russia and with NATO. We've seen Russia repeatedly testing NATO. A latest instance came on Saturday when Romania said a Russian drone had breached its airspace. We also, of course, saw all those drones coming into Poland last week. Are NATO countries doing anything other than just sort of condemning it? Is there stuff going on behind the scenes?
Well, yeah, it's a very good question, because this is one of these moments where NATO appears to function like a great big international committee, which of course on one level it is, rather than an organisation capable of fighting a war. And of course Putin just loves to work away at the difference between those two things and to test and humiliate and expose NATO in all sorts of ways. And I think this is quite a dangerous moment, actually, in the sense that if this firing of drones towards Poland, for example, becomes routine, I think all sorts of things may happen, including Poland unilaterally responding. Trump might finally do something to back up NATO. But in the meantime, we have seen some really interesting stuff. So the French, for example, sent 3 more Rafale jets to Poland. They said to reinforce the air defences. But the plane spotters out there soon detected that these 3 aircraft, you wouldn't think much of it under other circumstances, but were from the squadron that is used for nuclear weapon delivery. So they're from a specific French squadron which is trained and equipped to use a French air-launched nuclear system. And in that sense, I think highly significant signalling that even if the US is not going to do obvious deployments and things to back up Poland in this situation. And why not, in a way? Because Trump does love Poland. So, you know, it may still happen. France is. And so, yeah, I think that situation has lots of ingredients that make it potentially quite threatening, particularly if Putin decides, you know, this is too good not to do on a regular basis. Because then, you know, surely the tension will rise, and there is the possibility of response from Poland or NATO more generally.
I mean, you can sort of feel how the incremental ratcheting up could happen, in that drones cross over and there's no response. Maybe they hit a Ukrainian target just on the other side of the border. There's no response, and it builds up and up.
Absolutely.
But from Putin's perspective, if we're to assume that he's not just evil, we're not just talking about Mordor here. What's in it for him?
I think if you are involved, as he believes he is, in a sort of battle of wills across the decades with the likes of Ukraine, most obviously, Georgia, and 1 or 2 other countries that left the Soviet Union but did not join NATO yet, your aim is to expose the weakness of NATO and to show that it doesn't provide the security you might be looking for. So, and I think even those countries like the Baltic republics, which did join NATO, I think he's seeking to sow doubt in their minds that NATO would come to their help if Russia was to put serious pressure on them. And all of that is part of, you know, Putin's very long-term attempt, if not exactly to reconstitute the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire, but to bring countries closer again to its security orbit and to deny NATO the chance of further expansion.
Yeah, let's move to the Middle East. Qatar is hosting an emergency meeting of Arab and of Middle Eastern states after Israel's airstrike on Hamas leaders in Doha last week. The Qatari Prime Minister has urged the international community to stop applying double standards and to punish Israel for this strike. How significant is this, and what's likely to happen?
Well, look, I think it was significant, and obviously it was a fiasco in a sense for Israel. We've talked about before how sort of unnervingly successful for Arab countries the Israelis have been in the fusion of intelligence with the military means to strike very quickly at distance from their country, resulting in the elimination of pretty much the entire Hezbollah leadership, the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, for example, the killing of large part of the Yemeni cabinet a few weeks ago in Yemen. So in a sense, we've got used to them mounting these quite sort of shocking operations, but clearly from the Israeli perspective extremely effective in the sense of their use of intelligence. And here we see they screwed up. And not only did they screw up militarily and they didn't get the leaders of Hamas that they wanted, but of course there was also a good deal of political collateral damage because, Qatar is the home to this big US base. It was embarrassing to the Qataris and to the Americans, of course, and it caused a lot of the Gulf states to think, hang on a minute, we've assumed for years that the United States is our ultimate guarantor of our security here. And if they're just going to let Israel do these things, because I don't think anyone was entirely convinced by some of the things that came out of Washington. They all assume that.
So you wrote that in your column this weekend. That you suggested it's unlikely the Israelis hadn't sought some kind of approval in principle, at least from Trump beforehand.
I think that's right. You get the political approval on the general level. Now, of course, that may have happened weeks ago in some meeting in the Oval or whatever, or over the phone. And then you get the very specific technical coordination. Now, the Americans did admit that the Israeli military had told their military that there were missiles incoming. The Americans implied that this was very shortly before the strikes hit. But it's just inconceivable that the Israeli military would not have given the American military significant warning of what was about to happen and significant time-wise. Because otherwise, they could think they were under attack from Iran or the Russians or, all kinds of mishaps might happen. So I think in that respect, there's a bit of a sort of dumb show going on between the US and Qatar, some strong words from the Qataris in the day or two afterward. But then we see on Friday the Prime Minister, Mohammed Al-Thani, flying to the US, meeting the Vice President, having dinner with Trump, and, all the feathers, the ruffled feathers being smooth. But I think the really key thing now, looking to the week ahead and the week after this one, is these questions around Israel's position that if the week after this one, France, other countries move ahead with recognition of the Palestinian state, they, as some kind of political counterstroke, will annex some or all of the West Bank. Now, I think that makes this next week very, very important and tricky in Middle East political terms. Is Marco Rubio in Jerusalem currently to tell the Israelis, don't do it? We don't really know whether Trump has a view on annexing parts or all of the West Bank. What we do know, and this is a measure of something else we've talked about before, which is the degree to which, as American power recedes, other actors become more important, is that probably Israel's next best ally, would you believe, the United Arab Emirates, which has normal diplomatic relations with Israel, is very, very worried about this annexation thing and has been publicly and privately cautioning the Israelis not to do it. I suspect they will be the most influential people in this case because, of course, this deal they've got with Israel, normal recognition flights, to Dubai and Tel Aviv.
This is Trump's Abraham Accords. Yeah.
They know, the Israelis, that if the Emiratis tank this deal, that's humiliating for Trump as well. Mm-hmm. So every which way, I think they've got to think really carefully before doing this. And it could be a huge strategic error if they do.
How much, going back to that attack on Doha, how much of it do you think was absolutely an attempt to take out the Hamas leadership with there? And how much of it was an attempt to basically derail peace negotiations in exactly the way they've done?
Well, firstly, I think, as I wrote on Sunday, peace negotiations, frankly, since the Israelis resumed their military offensives in March, nothing really of significance has happened. At various times, delegations have been here and there, both sides sort of going through the motions, not wanting to appear in the wrong. the way that the Israeli government briefed it to their journalists was, oh, well, the element in Qatar were holding back the chances of peace. This was going to be like what we did with Hezbollah a year ago, which is to remove the radicals that stand in the way of peace and open the way to a diplomatic solution. That's how the Israeli government has briefed it out. Well, anyway, they didn't get those people, and they've inflamed, temporarily at least, the situation with Qatar. So, was it designed to kill off the prospect of peace? Clearly, a lot of people will assume that, since they now assume Netanyahu sort of doesn't want it under any circumstances. But, for all the reasons we've been talking about this morning, which is the broader relationship with the US, the United Arab Emirates, and indeed the Saudis, and the strains on Israeli society of continuing this war indefinitely, it has to be assumed that at some point Netanyahu will want to stop this. And the tentative way in which they've dealt with this Gaza City issue, which they've been talking about going into since May, but actually they're still not deep within the city. They're doing these shaping operations around Gaza City. Most of the inhabitants are still thought to be there, several 100,000 people. And so even all that huffing and puffing from Israeli hardliners about going into Gaza, they still haven't done it, which all shows, I think, a desire to use that pressure to try and bring about some sort of ceasefire or solution.
Look, finally, Mark, there's a fascinating detail in your piece about that attack on Doha, where you say it might have failed because the negotiators left their phones while they went off to pray. Tell us about that.
Well, this is another thing that was briefed out to the Israeli press. I mean, it seems to me to be credible because we know, for example, using some of the software that they have. So normally, when you track people's phones, you, if you're the host country, of course, you use the infrastructure of the phone masts and everything else to fix their position. The Israelis, we know, because we know about the Pegasus software hack that was spread through WhatsApp that appeared quite a while ago now, more than 10 years ago, that the Israelis have ways of taking control of various apps and aspects of your phone, which would include, of course, the location data. So what that allows them to do is, without being the Qatari mobile phone operator, to get data on people's location in time and space. And it seems that, of course, they had this malware on several of the Hamas leaders' phones. And they concluded, because the phones were still all in the meeting room, they could locate them that precisely, that the meeting was continuing. And, of course, the missiles flying over 1,000 miles, we now know, had a significant flight time, even being quite rapid missiles, fast missiles. So there was the chance, once you launched them, that these guys might leave the room. And it appears that they did to go to pray nearby. And that's why the missiles hit the meeting room, but not where they were praying.
Fascinating. Fascinating. And,
they left their phones in the meeting room.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, good. One of the best arguments against smartphones I've heard. Mark Urban, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Always a great pleasure to speak to you, Mark. If you want more Mark Urban, and who wouldn't, you can watch his film, Is the Old World Order Dead, on the Times Originals YouTube channel right now. And of course, you can also read Mark in the Sunday Times every single week.